welcome to another one of our Two Beer Ideas lunchtime sessions. Well, I say lunchtime, it's lunchtime in the UK. And today's speaker's joining us from New York, so it's definitely not lunchtime there. It's more of a breakfast session in America. These Two Beer Ideas events, they're coming round, and I must admit, I've absolutely loved every single one of them. It's been really nice interactive sessions, building the community, and Cecilia was kind enough to outreach to us and say hello and say, well, what about a session on this? And absolutely very grateful to her for doing that. I will just super quickly call out, we are always looking for speakers. So if you're enjoying today's session and think you have something to share, by all means, do get in touch. Love to see Joshua in the chat, also joining from NYC. So yeah, welcome. Thanks for being here. As you can see, we're talking about the psychology of authentic interactions, designing for connection and trust with Cecilia. And I'll maybe invite Cecilia, if you don't mind, if you could turn on your camera and microphone, come and join me on stage, Cecilia. So, hey, how are you doing today, Cecilia?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.
We love that. A global audience. And you were saying just before you joined, Cecilia, that actually you've been working on UK time today. So you've had an early start already. You've been up for a little while, have you?
Yes, for those who are familiar with the local time zones, I started at 3:30 Eastern this morning.
We love that dedication. And here you are with us. So thank you so much, Cecilia. Cecilia is the founder at Three Standard Deviations. Strong interest across technology, data, and how people make decisions. And I think how people make decisions has intrigued me as well. So very data driven from the background. What I might do, if it's okay, Cecilia, I'll stop sharing my screen and ask you to share yours. And obviously invite you, please do tell the people at home more about yourself once you start your presentation. As you're doing that, the thing that I will call out, we have got the chat feature and we also have the Q&A feature. And what I would ask, if you have a specific question relating to today's session, if you could put it into the Q&A, that would really help us. It just makes it easier to talk them all through at the end. But equally, the chat is open. So, feel free to say hello. As mentioned, Joshua has already mentioned in there that he's joined us from NYC. But yeah, anyone else, feel free to say hello. And I think at some point, Cecilia might even jump into the chat and say hello as well. But we'll see how we go as the session goes on. So slides look good, Cecilia. So if you're happy, I'll leave you to it and come back at the end for the Q&A.
Okay, brilliant.
Amazing. Have a good one.
Well, thank you. So first of all, thank you to everyone. David, Maddie, the Two Beer Ideas team. It is such an honor, humbleness, and opportunity to be able to share some of these ideas with you. And I do have my cup with me. It is morning in NYC, so you can only guess what's inside. So what are we talking about today? I am very curious. My understanding is everyone is somewhat related into the creative disciplines, design disciplines, and people who are trying to create experiences for others. So I'm very curious. I do have the chat open and I do love an interactive audience. How many of you are confident that the things you're designing, the experiences you're creating, are really creating those authentic interactions with consumers, with customers? I'm curious to see in the chat. A little bit confident, not so confident, psychology curious, just because it's an intriguing title. Okay, no, not so, oh no, okay. Okay, so the good news is, really, thank you. Thank you for investing in yourself, because there's so many things going on. We're getting very close to the end of the year. Everyone is trying to do too many things all at once. And so investing the time in yourself to build your own capabilities, your own discipline, your own expertise in this area, it's going to pay dividends. And so thank you for attending the session today. So I start with a quick story. How many of you have ever received a notification that looks like this? So this is a Facebook notification that came through on email, and there's a friend request. I'll be very honest with you. It has been many, many moons since I've been on Facebook. Actually decades since I've been on Facebook. But the story for me was quite personal in the sense that I had started when Facebook had started on the platform, and I had a group of friends, and someone had reached out to me not too long ago outside of this saying, oh, they received this friend request. And I said, okay, well, whatever, Instagram, TikTok, anything else, maybe not so much Facebook. And they were saying, oh, do you remember so-and-so? And this was a person that had all sorts of um, challenges in their life. And so we kind of lost touch over time. And it was found out a while back that this person had passed along and was no longer with us. However, no one had notified Facebook. And so this dormant profile was still being activated. And so there is a mechanism to say if someone passes away, you can memorialize the account, and therefore it's very clear to anyone who contacts it or comes into contact with that profile that that individual is no longer with us. However, that isn't always the case with everyone, and there isn't always a mechanism to notify a platform like this that this person has passed away. And so it was a somewhat of a bitter reminder of we leave digital footprints everywhere we go, especially in social media. And sometimes we're not always fully aware of how we take care of those profiles, how those profiles change in our dynamic. And as designers, as creators of experiences, it's so critical to be aware of, oh, data is not static because it's people that data reflects. And those people are not static. And therefore, how do we think about a full life cycle of experiences with a platform? So it's not just that one interaction, it's what happens over time. And so, as with most things that happen over time that involve people, what do we have to think about today? We're thinking about trust and how platforms and design and experiences involve participation. And so what do I mean by trust? Trust is the foundation, really, of any meaningful interaction between individuals and individuals in their environments. And so it's really important to ensure that when you are asking someone to invest time, attention, energy into what you've created, that you build that trust. And what do we mean by participation? It refers to how people contribute and engage with those platforms and experiences. So it could be through content creation or feedback or comments or simply a like or simply a thumbs up. And so those are all kinds of expression mechanisms that we as designers and creators of experience have to continuously think about. How are we enabling self-expression of the user, and how are we constraining that self-expression? And then the intersection of these two ideas. And so I'm going to make an argument with you and show you a framework regarding the expectation from consumers is different now. So at the burgeoning of the internet, at the beginning of social media, what some authors and some leaders will call Web 2.0, everything was about expressing out. So I'm speaking out into the world, less so interactive, less so co-created. And now we're at a point of the maturity of this medium and discipline of internet and digital, that there's an expectation from consumers that we co-create. So user-generated content, we want to participate in the creation of the experience, and we also want to talk about it too. So even in the chat right now, people are making comments, which is great and fantastic. So there's this meta narrative that's happening while we're creating these experiences. And so as designers, what we're going to explore today is how do we foster these environments that not only build trust, but really encourage authentic interactions amongst users within that environment. So I said a whole bunch of fancy things at the top. What does this all mean? These sound like fluffy words. How do we actually do this? So good news, we already have an idea of how to do this. So we know how to create trust. And so here I'm presenting to you a particular framework from Professor Blanchard. He's affiliated with Cornell University, and he's a leadership researcher. And this framework is the ABCD of trust. There are other frameworks out there. There's more rigorous psychological frameworks out there. However, what I love about the ABCD, it's a little bit Western, but it's also relatively easier to remember, and there's only 4 dimensions. And so in his framework, and he was very much interested in how in organizations do we build trust between leaders and their employees. And so in terms of creating trust, we have able. So can we demonstrate competence? So if you're thinking about designing platforms and experiences, if you're building an experience that's about sharing information or sharing expertise, how do you communicate? How do you signal this expertise? Believable. Is there components of the experience that implies integrity? So are there signals that there's a certification or credibility that's associated with the experience or design that you're creating? Connected. And this is a part that's a little bit hard because we're talking about a digital experience. How do we demonstrate we care about others? So it's not just about how many interactions can we get. It's not just about how many dopamine hits can we generate, but how are we demonstrating that there is a care about the other users that are utilizing the platform, and more broadly, the groups that are being represented inside of these platforms. And then dependable. So how many of us really, really hate it when our email doesn't work, or really, really hate it when, oh gosh, I'm supposed to be in the Zoom meeting and Zoom doesn't work. Or I have the app for rideshare and oh no, it's now very, very busy and now it's crashing and now I can't get a taxi or a ride service. And so ABCD is a great way of thinking about how do we build trust with users by creating experiences and features inside of our design experience such that it explains all these 4 dimensions. It's not to say you have to be perfect in all, but it is to say that you should have some cognizance and some awareness of all of those 4 dimensions. Okay, so we know how to create trust. We have a very good framework that's been around for a few decades at this point, well studied, well researched, well applied. So easy, right? But we find that we still have trust issues. So this is research. It's a couple of years old at this point. And fun facts, I tend to source everything. And so if you are very much interested in getting into the details, finding more, finding reasons to disagree with me, and then let me know later, feel free to utilize the sources. I always footnote. So I encourage you to further educate yourself as additional resources. So these are 2 studies. I believe one is Ipsos and the other one Deloitte. And so these are global studies, typically very well researched, but they are a little bit older in the sense that I think it's 2022, 2019. So 63% of internet users trust the internet. Oh, okay. So we all use the internet, but we have trust issues with the internet. Ouch. 79% of B2C leaders believe customers have somewhat of a very high trust in their company's brand. Um, a little bit biased there, right? So companies always think they're doing better, but it's good that they're really confident that their consumers trust them. But oh, womp womp, 52% of consumers feel somewhat or very high trust for the brands they purchased or use. So there's a delta there. So 79 versus the 52. So businesses think they're creating experiences that elicit trust, high levels of trust, but consumers maybe a little bit more tepid. And so there's a delta here where there's an opportunity to improve upon the trust. And why do I say trust matters? Because it also leads to loyalty and stickiness and all those wonderful things we want to do when we're actually trying to create experiences and most likely a commercialization of those experiences. So bottom line up front, if you want to skip all the slides, but just listen to this message, design choices shape how people connect to each other within platforms. And that authenticity builds that trust. And so my commitment to you today is you're going to walk away with some psychological and behavioral science frameworks. We already went through one of them, so the ABCD of trust. We're going to go through checklists and examples, and you're going to tell me all how you have more examples than I do of practical features in your own lived experience, in your own practice, because you're doing this way better than me, of how to embed features into the design that elicits trust or sometimes maybe encourages distrust. So those are choices too. And then I'm going to give you a freebie. So I have a trust and authenticity design assessment that I utilize in my own personal practice. I utilize it in practice with clients. It's quite lengthy. However, I'm giving you the cheat code, the one pager, and we'll go through it at the end. So you can actually use it in your own practice as well. So I've said a lot of things. So I haven't actually explained, who am I? So this is me. I'm Cecilia Dones, and I am the founder of 3 Standard Deviations. Yes, it is a statistics joke. I am one of those weird hybrids. What do I mean by that? I'm a researcher. I'm a practitioner, which means I have worked in industry. If you're familiar with the US market, I have worked in Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, as well as small firms as well. I'm also an academic. And what that means is that I love bringing the rigor of already well-established frameworks from academia and bringing it into practice. Why do I love doing that? Because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I just want to apply it in my own context. And so have all the smart, really, really smart people figure out the frameworks, figure out how do we do this better? How do we do this with some rigor? And then I can apply it into my own business, into my own practice. So I love the intersection of those ideas. In terms of my academic work and why I love this topic, I study trust and authenticity signals and ambiguous virtual environments. So what does that really mean? I have all sorts of trust issues with the internet, and I'm using my research to help figure out, who do I trust? What do I trust? How do I navigate this space? I also teach AI ethics, AI design. I also teach analytics. And so I have both the quantitative and qualitative skills. So you'll hear a little bit more quantitative sometimes, and then you'll hear a little bit of philosophy sometimes. I'm also the author of a Substack, Authentic Interactions, so you can get a little bit more flavor of how I try to combine all those ideas together, and you'll have anecdotes from me as well. Here's my wall of logos. It's abbreviated, but it's to give you a sense that I cross sectors, and I also cross different types of universities. So from that perspective, I do have additional experience. So enough about me. Back to trust. So for those of us who are familiar with what's going on in the world at the moment, there's elections all over the place. And I was actually in London on July 4th when the country was having their elections. It was quite organized in comparison to what I've experienced here in the US. So it was a very different vibe for sure. So on the left-hand side, what you see is a piece of artwork from Shepard Fairey, who had done some work for the Barack Obama campaign in 2008 when he was running for the president of the United States. And it was a commissioned piece, and Shepard Fairey is an American artist. And it took a minute. It was beautiful, well accepted. There has been variants of it since then. But it was a very curated, organized type of participation. So let's go find an artist that's well known. Let's go create this art piece. Okay, let's utilize this for the US election. That was 2008. For those of us who may be following what's going on in the US, what's happening now? On the right-hand side, you see something a little bit different. So this is the current Vice President Kamala Harris, and this is one of her campaign posters. And what you also see is Charlie XCX, and this was over this past summer, and it was Dean Brat Summer. So Kamala is Brat. What's interesting about this is, as opposed to what happened in the Obama case in 2008, where there was a commissioning organization, this actually came from TikTok. So Charlie XCX's fans were so enamored with the statement from Charlie XCX that they decided to create their own versions of what was going on. And this is one of those examples. So people within the platform of TikTok decided, hey, I want to be part of this conversation. I want to create. I want to participate. And that brings us to the next framework. So this is a particularly famous quote, if you're familiar with this discipline. Participatory culture shifts the focus of literacy from one of the individual expression to community involvement. That sounds a bit academic. What does it mean? So Henry Jenkins is a theorist in the field, and he was very much interested in understanding, oh, this medium of the internet, this medium of social media, it's not so much one speaking to many anymore. It's more like many speaking to many. So people want to contribute, people want to participate. So it's going from traditional literacy, which was very much focused on traditional skills, individual skills, reading, writing, to a new digital literacy, which emphasizes how do we think about the individual in context of the collective intelligence. So we go from creating things on our own and then sharing to, oh, we're having a dialogue. We're sharing in real time. We're creating in real time. And so as designers, as creators of consumer experiences, we have to think about, oh, how is what I'm creating, how is the mechanisms, the features that I'm embedding into my designs, either helping to facilitate that collaboration, helping to facilitate that creativity, or by choice, conscious choice, maybe when we want to constrain it in some way. Constraining is not so bad. Constraining can also lead to creativity as well. My argument is that we need to be conscious of it as designers, because how we design affects how people express themselves. So let's better understand, okay, fun quote, great, fantastic. What do we mean by participatory cultures? And so here's a great quote. Henry Jenkins, he's a media scholar who's currently affiliated with the University of Southern California in their media department. And what he argues is a participatory culture has relatively low barriers of engagement. So like the TikTok case, anyone can pretty much sign up. There's strong support for sharing creations with others. So people are actively trying to share what they create. There's an informal mentorship. So you kind of learn from each other and you can ask each other questions. Members believe their contributions matter, and I think this is very important. When we think about motivation psychology, why people do the things they do, one of the key components of that is, do I believe what I am doing matters? That's such a key component of motivation. And then care about others' opinions. So do people like what I'm doing? Do people not like what I'm doing? How do I adjust myself? How do I get that feedback? And so again, I put there's a fuller paper and several books and several articles as well. So if you want to learn more about Professor Jenkins' work, highly, highly recommend. If you are a media studies scholar yourself, you're probably already familiar with this work. So I am so curious. We all work with platforms. So in your own personal experience, what platforms do you use that you think kind of fits this participatory culture? So feel free, put it into the chat. Reddit, okay, yes, yes. I will admit I was a stalker on Reddit for years and years before I started contributing, but yes. Insta, okay, I hear you too. I hear you too. Wikipedia, very good. Yes, that's a very good example, Wikipedia. The collective knowledge there in specific. All right, LinkedIn, Blue Sky. Oh, I still heart them. Good mission. Mastodon, also good mission as well. Any others? Oh, okay, rolling it back. MySpace. How many of us remember MySpace? I love that too. All right, so I love these ideas, and I think everyone has the definition spot on. I'll show you my answer. which overlaps with yours. So that means I'm in good company. So here are examples of participatory culture platforms. So if you're designing a platform where you're trying to get people to engage and people to contribute digitally, here are really good examples of platforms who've successfully done that. So here we go, Wikipedia, collective knowledge creation. So as of 2023, 59 million articles. So there's a lot to coordinate there, and to have that in a centralized system with just a few curators or creators, that wouldn't be possible. And so here's a really great example, GitHub. So for those of us who are programmers or who've ever had to take a programming class, and you're like, oh gosh, Stack Overflow is a bit mean, GitHub is a little bit nicer. Collaborative coding and problem solving. So this is another platform where you have a lot of that interaction. Oh yes, Discord, heart Discord, yes. So GitHub has over 200 million repositories. So here's another example. And then Twitch, I think some of us already mentioned it, live streaming and community interaction. It was really about gaming at first, but now we find all sorts of topics, baking, beauty. I find it really fascinating what kind of different types of topics show up on Twitch. So there you go. Other examples, YouTube, Reddit, we've already said it, so you guys get the point. So participatory culture means there's an expectation from the consumer, I should be able to interact. I'm not just passively consuming, I'm actively consuming with others. So what do we do with that? So here's our next framework. So the Fogg Behavioral Model, this is a professor from Stanford. He was really interested in understanding, okay, I get it, digital, okay, I get it, we need to get people off couches or people willing to click on or willing people to take action. And so he had built this behavioral model, and what I love about it is, one, it's kind of relatively easy to see, and two, there's not that many components, so it's not too complicated to think about. And so what he argues and has been able to demonstrate in different organizations over time, so this is not a new framework, it's relatively well studied, behavior is driven by three factors. So motivation, which we see on the y-axis or the vertical axis, ability, which we see on the x-axis, and prompt, which is where we see what's all in the middle. So motivation. So motivation is always coming from the user or the consumer. So at the end of the day, this one is a little bit harder for designers to motivate in a different way. It's more important that designers are able to listen to the signals of different users as their motivations kind of wax and wane. And so in the case of a platform, a user may say, oh, I really love this community inside of Reddit. I'm really motivated to engage because I'm looking for others who are very much interested in a niche topic. And so ability also refers to how easy is it to engage? Do I have to like jump through 5 different credential hoops and log in this and download that app there and then update this and update that? Is it relatively easy for the user to actually engage with the platform and engage with others? And the prompt, which is where I argue designers have a lot of control in terms of figuring out what are the ways to motivate users and consumers to take action. This is the trigger to take action. So very common, people love to have email signups. So a sign up button is a great trigger to get people to give their email for additional content. So this is, again, where design features play such a critical role in getting users and getting consumers to take action. So when we're designing for trust and authentic interactions, we have to think about, how do we balance these 3 different variables? So motivation, we may or may not have as much control over. Ability, we do have some control over. Yeah, you can make things easier. Or in the case of, I used to work for luxury, I had mentioned LVMH. we would introduce actually friction into the digital experience. Why? Because we wanted the multisensorial experience in real life. And so encouraging users to not go digital, but go in real life, that's a choice you can have as an organization when you're trying to design experiences. So when do I choose the digital one versus the in real life one? What's the value proposition and difference in value proposition for consumers? And then prompt, I think this is the easy bread and butter. You can kind of do checklists on this one in terms of creating opportunities for users to engage. The fun part is we have the variables. The less fun part is this is continuously changing. So your motivations may change for every individual consumer. It can change over time. It can change over experience, depending on what resource constraints your organization may have, what prompts are available, what abilities are available. All of these can change. So it is a balancing act that you always have to manage. Okay, so we got into theory, and let's get more back into practical. So I have two platforms here. Which do you trust? So on the left-hand side, I have Amazon in the US. Halloween is considered quite a large holiday. And then on the right-hand side, I have Wish, which also I think I looked for Halloween as well. So they're both e-commerce platforms. Okay, Amazon, I hear you. Thank you, Nikki. None. Oh, Michael, I have all the questions for you. Amazon, yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. So what about the Amazon platform may be communicating, hey, you can trust. I also recognize I'm oversimplifying the problem when you're talking about a well-established organization as opposed to a relatively new one. But from a design perspective, from a usability perspective, Amazon tends to have clear product information and pricing. They do have a ratings and review system. They are relatively transparent about their shipping and return policies, and they're very much about secure checkout. And so from a commercial transactional perspective, they're checking a whole bunch of boxes to say, okay, you can trust the platform. Wish plays on price. And so while they do have really great items as well, operationally, it can be a little bit different in the sense that sometimes you'll buy something. I don't know if you've seen the TikToks where people will say, oh, this is the Wish picture, and this is what I actually got. Ouch, disconnect. So misleading, sometimes product images, sometimes the pricing can be unclear with hidden fees. It is really more self-serve. So while some of us may have negative experiences with Amazon's version of customer service, Wish is a little bit more challenging. And then the return process is quite confusing. And so, gosh, we have two e-commerce platforms. One is building trust and one is breaking trust. And so let's see more concretely, what are trust building features versus trust breaking features? So I pause here. I do have a few slides where I find people like to take pictures. So if you are going to do a screen grab, feel free to do so. So what are the actual activities that build trust? Psychological trust, that psychological safety to say, let's engage. So in the trust building side, we have transparency. So being super clear about your privacy policies and data usage. So some of us may be very familiar with GDPR, CCPA, CPRA. If you're in the healthcare space in the US, HIPAA, there's all sorts of regulations regarding data privacy and the utilization of data. The EU AI Act, which components of it is going live, rolling in 2025 onward. California is doing their thing regarding deepfakes. And so that legislation is slowly working its way through, which has implications. So being transparent. So consumers are beginning to understand, oh, wait, my data is being collected. Oh, wait, I'm not sure if I'm okay with that, and giving them that transparency and also choice for consent. Control, that goes into the next component. So giving that users that control. GDPR is a little bit more strict, so it's a little bit easier to be in compliance, but in the US, it can be a little bit more fuzzy. Consistent design. Where do I get the most frustrated? When the mobile app doesn't match the web page inside of a browser. And so sometimes I'll get a marketing email where the link doesn't really work properly if I'm in a mobile device, and then I have to actually go to like a laptop to figure it out. Oh, not so good, not a good consumer experience. So when you're trying to remove friction from the consumer experience, not having that consistent design that's interoperable, not very helpful. So trust building platforms tend to do that quite well. So they think about the multimodal experience. They think about the multi-device experience. And then timely feedback, a classic one. Oh, I clicked the button. Did anything happen? I clicked the email send button. Did it actually send? So that's a classic one. Trust breaking. So when it comes to trust breaking, hidden costs, so surprising users with like incremental fees can be challenging. Dark patterns. So what I mean by this is sometimes it can be very difficult to do a certain action item. So how often have you been you've received an email and you're like, oh, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to be part of this newsletter distribution. And you're trying to unsub. Oh, for some organizations, unsubbing or trying to quit your subscription can be quite challenging with extra steps. And so they're introducing friction. And so that's not really a good experience for a user or consumer. When somebody wants to break up with you and you keep dragging along the relationship, even though they really want to leave, is that really good for you as the organization and the other individual? And then in real life, that also has implications too. Excessive data collection. This is not a game for those of us who are familiar. It was relatively popular in the US, Hungry Hippos. Data is not that game. So part of your data strategy should have a component of fit for purpose. So we collect this information because we're going to exchange this information for valuable consumer experience. So for those of us in the creative design space, something to think about. But I also would highly encourage you to work with your data leaders, your analytical leaders, your analytical counterparts to kind of think through those ideas as well. So you don't have to do this in a silo. This is very much a team sport. And then inconsistent information. So this is where it gets really annoying. So I find this quite more often when in a retail situation where, oh, it was actually a discount through midnight and a certain time zone. And then there was a misalignment with what's on the website versus what's in the mobile app. And that can be a very frustrating consumer experience when things aren't coordinated in that way. And so again, here's a list of trust builders versus breakers. And so you can utilize this in your own practice as well. And so we're going to go through a few more ideas a little bit faster. So we'll talk about foundational principles to help ensure that we're building this authenticity environment, this trust type environment, and we'll look at anonymity as a component, and we'll also talk about more practical feature items for you to consider in your own practice. So design for everyone. I am a proponent for diversity. I teach this in AI ethics, inclusion, and making sure that people feel seen, feel heard, feel like they belong is so critical when you're trying to build trust in groups. And so making sure that you're making opportunities for those that may be more on the margins to participate and being clear about that as well, because that also signals values that you're trying to create as part of the design process and maybe the platform, the product that you want to embed as a value of that culture. Hey, you use this product because this value is important to you. And so as a designer, you actually have influence. And so I would say accessibility features, being culturally sensitive, are ways to ensure that you're making design choices that includes everyone. So if you look around your design table and everyone looks like you, it's an immediate feedback that find somebody who doesn't, find somebody with a different background. because their perspective, their experience will only add to the value of whatever you're designing, whatever product platform you're creating. Anonymity, this one's a tough one because the internet it has a mixed bag of different opportunities. So here, I'm looking at anonymity versus like authenticity or authentication. And so I have 4 different platforms where you can have full anonymity, which is all the way on the left, versus full transparency, which is what you have all the way on the right. And when it comes to kind of positive or beneficial consumer experiences, I make the argument that there is a gradation along with that. So for those of us who are familiar with 4chan, it's the darker parts of the internet for some individuals. It's completely anonymous. And so from that way, it's great in the sense that you're uninhibited, you can fully express yourself. However, that anonymity sometimes creates opportunities for people to disabuse that. And all the way on the other end, we have LinkedIn, where you are verified as an individual. And therefore there's high levels of accountability. So fabricating, parts of your work history or things like that is socially not acceptable and not part of the cultural norm. And I'm quite certain, okay, yes, yes, agree. Twitter or X, formerly Twitter, that's its own case study itself. Maybe there'll be a future talk on that. And then also Amazon as well. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. So, okay, anonymity, that's a choice. As a designer, do we allow for full? Do we allow for partial? Do we allow for full transparency? That has implications with how people will choose to treat each other. So how do we signal trust? Here's a good checklist as well. Trust indicators. So here, standard, I would say table stakes for any platform or data product that you're interested in creating consumer experiences with or user experiences with. Verification badges. So how do we signal credibility? How do we signal verification? How do we signal trust? Badging is quite common. So this one is a goodie, oldie but goodie. User ratings and reviews. So, okay, don't trust a badge. I don't know where the badge came from. Anyone can create a badge. How about the community itself? So ratings and reviews is a great way to also create, 1, interaction opportunities, but 2, really allow people's opinions to come out regarding the platform, the service, the utilization, et cetera, et cetera. Reputation systems, this one's really good, especially if you have a marketplace type of platform. So what's the reputation of the buyer? What's the reputation of the seller? So making sure that there's kind of some level of social accountability regarding that. That one's a little bit of a slippery slope, just because social scoring. I also work in policy land with other policy individuals and ethics individuals, and social scoring is a little bit of a sensitive area because there's a lot of gray space. What's okay to score, what's not okay to score. But at least for right now, I would say basic reputation systems regarding credibility and accountability, perfectly fine, good to have. And then content moderation. And so I think having a layered point of view or waterfall point of view regarding content moderation could be quite helpful. So meaning because many, and I'll lead to the next part, because many platforms utilize algorithms which are incentivized on interactions, which tends to polarize the content itself. Having a waterfall point of view regarding what content is considered more neutral, and therefore, okay, this is good to kind of push forward. What's considered all the way on the other end is more fringe, and maybe we don't promote it as much, and users have to actually proactively try to seek it. I'm saying this simply, but in practice, it is quite difficult. There are really smart people trying to figure this out because at the end of the day, how do we decide what's okay for you versus me versus somebody else? Quite difficult, especially as cultural norms change over time. But here are some trust indicators that are very well stock standard. So we talked about individuals and how design features can affect individual interactions. So we need to start thinking about, oh wait, this participatory culture. Okay, the individual matters for sure, but then it's always the individual in the context of others, because we have network effects. We have platforms where people are interacting with each other. So we also have to think about the bigger picture of the community itself. And so we'll talk a little bit about design choices related to community. We'll also talk about measurement. How do we know if we're doing this design thing right? And then I'll give you my freebie assessment. So this is from MIT. They had done a workshop regarding social media. And this was a beautiful illustration. You can actually look up the actual workshop findings itself. But what I wanted to share from all of this was there was a very clear call out for transparency. So again, communicating effectively to users what's going on, and accountability. And so as designers, and we're thinking about, oh, how do we manage communications? How do we manage experiences? How do we manage different signals? This is so important in terms of building that trust. And especially if you are working on a social media type of experience, because it's so algorithmically driven, AI transparency and AI explainability is so important. I also do workshops on responsible AI, and this is an area that developers struggle as well. And the reason why is we're at the stage of development and maturity of AI systems where we're finding emergent properties when we are developing these AI systems. In parallel, we're trying to create systems to help us explain, because computers speaking to computers or machines speaking to machines, they don't need to speak and communicate in the way we do. And so building parallel systems that actually translates back what the computer or what the machine is doing in ways that humans can understand and humans can intervene and also control as needed is critical as part of this work. And I'm sharing this with a lot of humility because this is bleeding edge. We do not have all the answers in the technology space. So it's exciting because it's changing the way we experience our world, our lives, our digital experience. However, it's also a little bit concerning in the sense that we don't have all the answers, which means we're going to make mistakes. And so practicing grace and humility around, okay, we're going to make mistakes for sure. Let's make sure that every mistake we make, we're learning from it, is the mindset that I encourage you to have. So that way we continue to develop and continue to benefit from these newer technologies, but we're also being responsible about it. All right, so I'll give you a few more checklists for you in practice. So how do we build resilient online communities? Here's some cultural components. I'll give you a bonus framework from social psychology. So how do we define culture, attitudes, beliefs, values, and norms that are reinforced through rituals? And so when you're thinking about design of the consumer and user experience, how are you addressing values of the user base? Beliefs, these may be not explicit, they may be implicit. Attitudes, okay, are we measuring this at all? Norms, do they come in with the norms already? Are they all from one place, so the norms are relatively easy? Or do they actually, are they global? So you have multicultural norms that you have to be mindful of. And rituals, we practice, we are what we practice. And so what rituals do you embed as part of that experience, that consumer experience, such that, again, you're fostering the things you want to foster in that community, in that platform, in that design project, and you're discouraging kind of anything that may be potentially antisocial. So here, being clear about the norms, clear guidelines, empowering moderators, especially if you have a component where there's like a lot of open opportunities for text or communication. Reporting systems. So is there a way when someone feels slighted or harmed, or this is not right, do they have a means of communicating this so that there's a feedback loop for it to be addressed? Conflict resolution, there will be conflict whenever you have more than one person. in a group. And so how do you address that in a way that always holds on to human dignity? And then how do you recognize the good as well? I know we're always trying to mitigate the bad, but also how do you amplify the good? So how do we say, oh, we like this? And so this is all features that you can embed inside of your design project in your platform, in your product, such that you can have people coalesce. And this increases the trust, increases the activity, increases the interaction, and increases the stickiness. So how do you know if we're doing this right? Here's some user experience KPIs. I would argue there is a laundry list for sure, depending on specifically the objectives, the maturity, the goals, all of those things. Here are some standard ones. I would argue that pretty much work in most cases, but again, always take every framework and try to make it bespoke to your current situation and constraints. So retention rates, engagement depth, content creation rate. So I think this is not always as commonly spoken about, but I think this is important. When people stop using your platform or using your design experience to express themselves, that could be indication something is not working. And so that's a good opportunity to intervene. And then trust scoring, because again, at the end of the day, we tend, trust helps to facilitate the interaction and the authentic engagement. Um, and so we want to make sure that we're always monitoring that as well. All right, so we talked about what can we do today. What are things we need to think about tomorrow? So the future is kind of here. When I started my academic work, we got really excited about the word metaverse. For those of us who live and work in the real world, that word is less exciting now. And so I had to manage my own expectations about my academic work. And so virtual environments it is. The reason why I say, is it here? It is in pockets. So is it at scale? No. Will it be at scale? Eventually. The hard part is I don't have a crystal ball. I'm a statistician by training, but I don't like to make bets on this. I don't know when. So extended reality will be some version of how we perceive our lived experience. And what that means is that there will be components of augmented reality. So where we're overlaying overlaying different digital components into our lived experience, mixed reality. So there could be both completely virtual and then augmented experiences, and then virtual reality, where completely all of our other senses are closed and we're only seeing the digital environment. There are challenges from a design perspective regarding this, meaning, oh gosh, hyper personalization. How are you dealing with privacy? There might be concerns there. When we have more immersive environments, there's psychological concerns. Are people growing maybe potentially unhealthy attachments to that virtual experience? What happens when those individuals start to prefer only virtual experiences as opposed to real life experiences? Is that okay? We don't have all the answers yet. There are definite camps on both sides, and that's a very fun argument over dinner. But these are things we have to think about. And so from a design perspective, these will start to become more and more commonplace. So as you're thinking about creating experiences, well, the choice I make now, when should I reevaluate that choice in the context of, oh, everyone now wears AR glasses, or everyone's glasses have some augmentation of some sort, or, it's very common now that everyone has auditory devices in their ears, like AirPods. So how does that change the way I choose to create some kind of immersive experience? So these are real problems now. They're just not real problems at scale. As designers, as design leaders, I encourage you to keep it on your radar, because this will also be another way of creating opportunity for yourselves from a design perspective. So, oh, Second Life, yes. I had a character in Second Life too. And at the time I had her actually look like me. I don't know why I chose that. I chose not to be like really crazy. But Second Life, it's still around. It's interesting. That's also a good case study and maybe a future talk. So the abridged trust and authenticity design assessment. So this is on a scale of 1 to 5. I'm taking the original framework, the ABCs of trust, giving you a few questions to ask yourself about the projects you're working on. Hey, how am I actually doing on ability, believability, connectedness, dependability? Do you feel comfortable with that score? This could be a great tool to give to somebody else or an end user or a potential end user to say, oh, is it actually fulfilling the requirements? So I'm taking the ABCD of trust, but then also layering in that component of participatory culture, meaning, are we being inclusive enough, especially as these platforms grow bigger and bigger? And do we have a feedback mechanism? Do we have a reflection mechanism? I think this is critically important. I mentioned I'm a researcher, which means at the end of the day, I'm always looking for, how do I have this wrong? What has changed that it's what I thought was true is no longer true? How do I know that this is actually the piece of knowledge that I'm looking for? So having that feedback loop, that self-correcting mechanism is so important. So it's never one and done. It's more, how do we make this continuous in a way that doesn't like overwhelm you, but also recognizes that things change. So how do you adapt to those changes? So this is a short version. There is a very, very long version. This is not bespoke to your specific situation, but if this is something you're interested in further discussing, I'm more than happy to help because I think these are really important choices and feedback mechanisms for people who are in the power of designing consumer experiences. So where have we been? What have we done? We went through the ABCs of trust. We went through a participatory culture framework. We went through the Fogg Behavioral Model. I gave you a few more frameworks as well as freebies. We went through checklists upon checklists and examples upon examples of practical features you can think about if you're designing platforms or designing experiences, how to facilitate that trust, how to facilitate that interaction and authenticity. We talked about trust building features, trust breaking features. We talked about inclusivity, anonymity, algorithmic transparency, measurement, community management. And then I also gave you the shortened assessment so you can decide for yourself, hey, is this an opportunity area for you when it comes to your own design discipline? So we went through a lot. And I leave you with the same message again. So just in case you stuck it through the end, I'm so honored and humbled to be amongst so many great leaders because you are creating experiences that will affect people's lives. So your design choices changes the way we connect to your platform or your product, but also how we connect to each other. And that connection, that authenticity is how we build trust. That's how we work together, and that's how we continue as a society. So I ask the question again, how many of you are confident in now, knowing all this, that you'll be able to apply some of these ideas into your own design practice? And it's okay to say not as confident as well, because we'll always learn more and have opportunity to continue the conversation. And with that, thank you so much.
Wow. That was absolutely fantastic, Cecilia. I feel, if I'm honest, I feel like we should have paid for this. I feel like that was a masterclass, and to come and share your knowledge with the community, it's very, very much appreciated. So much to go through there. Actually, I feel a bit like I'm gonna have to watch it back. And I was taking notes as we were going, and the thing I absolutely loved was every time I had a question, you almost answered it on the next slide. So I was like, oh, I wonder how AI is going to deal with this. And then the next question is like, talk about the future. So absolutely amazing. How did how did you feel that went? Were you happy with the presentation and everything you got across there?
Um, these situations are always extra fun because one, I'm so inspired by people who actually attend because I'm a person who just asks curious questions. I'm a researcher,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the expertise is actually sitting in your audience. I just put
yeah. I love
fancy
it.
academic words to it.
No,
I
that's not
learned
true.
so much from the community.
I think the thing that I find with the speakers is when you find a speaker like yourself that's at this crossroads of different interests and technologies and academic research. And when you sit in that middle space, that's actually where I find that the best presentations come from. So we're really grateful for you for doing that. In terms of timings, I was hoping to get into a Q&A, but we do try and keep these to that sort of 1 hour slot UK time. So we have run a little bit out of time. But what Maddie's just done for everyone that is with us, we've put your, I hope you don't mind, Cecilia, we've just put your LinkedIn in the chat. So if anyone has any specific questions for Cecilia, I'm hoping you won't mind hearing from the community. And I think actually when we first spoke, you'd been in the UK, I think as you mentioned there, back in July, and you'd actually presented a session in person while you're in the UK. So
Yes.
I'm hoping maybe we can try and do something if you're ever back in the UK, we can perhaps try and get something in person if that might be an option.
No pressure. A live event, yes, I'm
Alive.
very much into that, but I do need a commitment then from the community. I
Yes.
have a North American accent.
Yeah.
I don't know how to drink a proper pint of beer.
Oh, wow. You're in a safe space. Don't worry. We'll look after you. You're part of you're one of us now. You're one of us. Awesome, awesome. I will draw things to a little close. As I say, I'm a little bit conscious of time. I do want to just end with another massive thank you. Hopefully you can tell how grateful we are. But that was absolutely fantastic session. You packed so much, into that session. There was so many takeaways, and very, very thought provoking for everyone that works in this sort of design space on the impacts that they're having. So thank you so much. And I'll maybe come to you for the last word, and then we'll wrap it up from there.
The only thing I can say is thank you. And I'm so excited to see what design creations you all create.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Cecilia. Thank you everyone for joining us wherever you are in the world. And we'll be back with you again very soon. But yeah, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.